Today I'll be doing Utah. So first I'll talk a little bit about their head coach at Kyle Whittingham, and then I'll talk some about their roster, and then go through their schedule game by game and give you a predicted winner and loser for each game. So I really like Kyle Whittingham as a football coach. He's great at player development and he's great at game planning. But what really limits him is recruiting, and that's what separates him from the top coaches of college football, in my opinion. Last year, I think it was really impressive that he was able to get 8 wins out of a team that already wasn't loaded with talent and was full of injuries everywhere, not just at quarterback, but at a whole bunch of other positions. Uh, and so I know it would be hard for Utah to have a top 15 recruiting class, but Utah ranked last year number 59 in recruiting, which was really bad. So I don't really think that Kyle Whittingham is that good of a recruiter anyway, because I know it would be possible to do quite a bit better than 59. Uh, but on Utah's roster, starting on the offensive side, they really struggled there last year, only averaging 22.6 points per game, and they ranked at 117 in passing last year. So it really showed how important Cameron Rising is to their offense. And it looks like he's going to be back to his old self this year, uh, recovering from a torn ACL injury. So in 25 college, or no, 26 college starts, Cameron Rising has 5,528 passing yards and 45 touchdown passes, and he also has 964 rushing yards on 145 carries and 12 rushing touchdowns, averaging 6.6 yards per carry. So he has 57 total touchdowns in that. I really like Cameron Rising as a quarterback. He is accurate as a passer, and he's also very athletic. He's able to make big plays when under pressure, throwing and running. And I think he's going to play in the NFL after this season. Uh, and at wide receiver, they weren't that good there last year, and they needed some help. And I think they got it bringing in Dorian Singer, who spent last season at USC and didn't do that much last season there. He was expected to become their top wide receiver, but it didn't come close to happening. But I think that it was partly because USC was so loaded at wide receiver. Utah is not like that, so I think he'll be their top wide receiver and have a great year there. And the year before last, when he was at Arizona, he had a huge year with 66 catches and 1,105 yards and 6 touchdowns, averaging a really impressive 16.7 yards per catch. And then at tight end, they returned one of the best in the country, Brant Cuthie, who also missed all of last year with a torn ACL, and he also missed all but 4 games the year before too. But in 2021, he had 50 catches for 611 yards and 6 touchdowns, averaging 12.2 a catch. And then in the first 4 games last year, I mean in 2022, before he got hurt, he had 19 catches for 206 and 3 touchdowns. Uh, and then at running back, they aren't really elite, but they're good. And Utah always is a really good rushing team, so I don't expect that to be any different this year. They do lose their best running back, Jaquindon Jackson, who transferred out, but they do have Mika Bernard coming back, who missed all but 2 games last year, and has these 2 years combined on 193 carries, 1,056 yards, and 6 touchdowns, averaging 5.5 a carry. And they also return Jalen Glover, who has in 2 years combined 215 carries for 922 and 6 touchdowns, averaging 4.3 a carry. And they also bring in a transfer running back from Idaho, which I know is a little team, but he had a good year there. His name is Anthony Woods. He had 16 rushing touchdowns and 1,131 yards and 5.5 yards a carry there last season. And on the offensive line, they're strong here. Utah's offense, coached by Kyle Whittingham, hasn't really so much been about the players that actually score points, which is quarterback, running back, and wide receiver. It's been more about developing an elite offensive line. Now, I'm not saying they haven't had good players at quarterback, running back, and wide receiver since he's been there. Of course, they have, but uh, they've been more about the line. So they returned 3 starters from last season on the offensive line, and they have 4 players that have played a lot of snaps, and they have 5 talented players. The whole starting group is talented, and that includes tackle Spencer Fanoa, who played in every game and started every game as a true freshman last year, and as a 4-star recruit, and was one of the best offensive linemen in the country last year, only allowing 2 sacks all season. Mm, so on defense, they return 8 starters from a defense that only allowed 18.8 points per game on average, and was number 4 in the country against the run, allowing only on average 82.8 rushing yards per game. Kyle Whittingham has been great at Utah at developing a good defense, especially the defensive lines, and they're really strong there this year. They've got 4 players back that all have a lot of starting experience. They returned Connor O'Toole, who is probably the best of all of them. He has in 22 games at 72 tackles and 6 sacks and 4 pass breakups and a forced fumble and fumble recovery. And in 8 games last year, he had 24 total pressures. And they also have Van Fillinger, who has 90 tackles in 33 games and 13 and a half sacks. And they have Kanua Tanufaza, who uh, started and played in every game last year as a freshman, and had 27 tackles and 2 sacks and a forced fumble. And they also have Junior Tafuna, who has in 38 games at 77 tackles and 7 sacks. And at linebacker, they look good here too. They returned 2 starters. They returned Kareem Reed, who has 184 tackles and 35 games and 6 sacks and 9 pass breakups and 3 interceptions. And Lander Burton, who has in 21 games and only 10 starts, 80 tackles and 4.5 sacks and 2 forced fumbles and 2 interceptions and 3 pass breakups. And they've also got Son Fakua, who played in 11 games but didn't start any games last year, but had 18 tackles on the year, and he had 7 tackles in the opener, and is expected to be good for them this year and get a lot more playing time. And they've also got a 4-star linebacker, Josh Calvert, who uh, didn't hardly get any playing time last year, but is expected to get more this year and help them out. And I'm probably pronouncing a lot of these names wrong, but I'm just trying to do the best I can with this. A lot of these names are really hard to pronounce. And then in the secondary, they don't look great, but I think they're going to be pretty good. They do lose 2 starters in the secondary that were really good, but they return at cornerback Samaya Vaughn, who is really good and is going to play in the NFL, and had last year at 53 tackles and 6 pass breakups and an interception. And then they bring in a transfer corner from Georgia Tech, Keenan Johnson, who had in 11 games, making 8 starts last year, 29 tackles and 3 pass breakups and an interception and 2 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery. He should be pretty good for them. And then they've also got a 4-star cornerback, Smith Snowden, who is expected to help them out this year, who didn't get much playing time last year. And then at safety, they return uh, Teo Johnson, who last year had 33 tackles and 5 pass breakups and a fumble recovery. And then they've also got Nate Ritchie, a pretty good safety who's only started 3 games last year, but played in 12 and had 22 tackles and a sack. And then on special teams, they look good there. Both specialists return that did a pretty good job for them last year. So now moving on to the predictions. So they start the year on Thursday against Southern Utah, which will be a very easy win. And then they play Baylor, which is not a conference game, even though they're in the same conference because of it being scheduled earlier before Utah decided to join the Big 12. But I think Utah will win this one pretty easily. Baylor's not going to be very good this year, I don't think. I think they'll be a little bit improved, but they just are not going to be very good defensively, in my opinion. And I don't think they have the kind of offense that Utah is going to have either to be able to beat them. So then they play Utah State, which will be an easy win. And then they play on the road at Oklahoma State, a huge game. This is probably going to be the 2 best teams in the Big 12 playing against each other in this game. I think it's going to be a great game, a very close one, and it's interesting with Kyle Whittingham and Mike Gundy going against each other. They're 2 very similar coaches. They've both been there the exact same amount of time and have almost exactly the same record as the head coach. And they both live off of player development and really good game planning. The difference is Whittingham is more of a defensive coach, while Gundy is more of an offensive coach. And this game, I think, is going to have quite a few points scored in it. Oklahoma State, I think, has a little better offense than Utah, but I think Utah has a better defense. But Oklahoma State's offense, I think, will give Utah's defense problems in this game. But I also think Utah is going to score a lot on Oklahoma State's defense because Oklahoma State overall did struggle on the defensive side of the ball last year. Uh, mm, but these teams are so even that I'm just going to take the home team. So I think Oklahoma State wins this one. Probably just by like a field goal. I think it'll go down to the end. So then they play Arizona, which will be another tough game. Arizona's offense, I think, is going to be able to score some points on Utah's defense. It's going to be very explosive, but Utah has a better defense than Arizona, and Utah's offense is going to be able to score a lot on Arizona too. I think, and Utah is just the better team in my opinion, the better coach team, and they've got the better roster at least by a little bit. So also they're playing at home, so I think Utah wins a close one here. Mm, so then they play Arizona State. This will be an easy win. One of the worst teams in the country. They'll destroy Arizona State. And then they play TCU. So this, I think, will probably be a pretty close game. TCU, I looked at their roster. They've got a nice group of wide receivers, but Utah's defense is better. Now, TCU, I saw, does have a good group of linebackers, but Utah's much better at the line of scrimmage. I think they're better in the secondary. Mm, so I think Utah wins this one. So now they play on the road at Houston, a team that's kind of rebuilding, losing, bringing in a new head coach, and they're just not very good right now. So I think Utah will win this one pretty easily. So now they play BYU, an in-state rival, but BYU's going to be really bad this year. I think Utah is so much better. Uh, they'll win this one easily. And then they play on the road at Colorado. So uh, everywhere except for throwing the football, Utah is on a completely different universe than Colorado right now, which is coaching and the secondary and linebacker, both lines of scrimmage, and running back. And also, I would take Cameron Rising over Shador Sanders as a quarterback because he's much more athletic than Shador Sanders is. So this also is against the most overhyped coach ever, Deion Sanders, who doesn't know what he's doing. I think Utah will destroy Colorado. So now they play Iowa State at home. So this game, I think it will be tough for Utah. Now, Utah, I think, is the better team, the better coach team, and they have a better roster than Iowa State does. But Iowa State, I think, could surprise this year and be pretty good. Now, I don't think they're winning the Big 12 or going to the college football playoff, but I do think they could have a pretty good team because I know they only won 7 games last year, but they have so many players and so much production coming back. I actually do some research before I do these predictions. I don't just take one look and then predict them. And if this was on the road, I might pick the upset, but playing at home, I think Utah is good enough to get the win in a close one, probably by like a touchdown. Mm. So then they end the season on a Friday night on the road at Central Florida, uh, a possible upset game. I've thought a lot about this game. I've been back and forth with it. Central Florida's coach Gus Malzahn isn't dumb. He knows what he's doing, and his offense, I think, will be able to score some points on Utah. But Utah, I think, is much better at the line of scrimmage on both sides, and I think they'll dominate Central Florida at the line of scrimmage. Central Florida is probably going to struggle at the line of scrimmage this year, and I think that'll be the difference. I think Utah will win by about a touchdown, but there is a good chance that Utah could lose this game. But my final prediction for Utah is 11-1 overall and 8-1 in the conference, which will very likely put them in the Big 12 championship game this year. But I don't see them doing any better than 11-1, and I think there's also a good chance they could go 10-2 because it's hard to win every game that you're supposed to. But that's it with this video, and please subscribe, and thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.